Welcome to the New Rainmaker Podcast, a weekly show for visionary founders and team members alike to come together and share the heartfelt, the cringe, and the radically honest truths about what it's really like to build and work for some of the world's most exposed brands on the biggest internet stages. I'm your host, Veronica Romney, and after working for some of the biggest names in the online space myself, I've learned that it takes both leadership and dream team collaboration to truly scale a company to its greatest potential. You can build a business alone, but you cannot scale it on your own. And my goal on today's episode and every episode is to inspire our dreamers and empower our leaders. Make sure to follow and share my podcast with your friends and colleagues, and feel free to tag me on Instagram at vromney with your insights and ahas. Now let's make it rain on today's episode. Shana, welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's an honor, actually, because I'm really excited for this conversation because we're going to talk about a really special team member that I think more organizations need, but don't even realize they need it. Right?
Yeah.
So why don't you, let's just start the conversation. Why don't you introduce yourself to the Rainmaker community and really like where you come from? And if you don't do a good enough job, gloating, I will for you. Don't worry.
Okay.
And then we're going to dive into all things community today. So go for it.
Okay. Sounds great. I'll do my best. Well, my name is Shana Lynn, and I've been in the online community space for over a decade. Started with traditional businesses, helping them take their marketing online and essentially creating online communities, and then moved into the space that we really work in now, which is a lot of course creators, membership owners, group program owners that have online focused businesses. And I've worked with them specifically to help them keep their customers longer by creating thriving communities and building empowered community teams. So I spent 3 years as Stu McLaren's director of community. He's the membership site expert. So not only did I get to work with his communities and building out his team and community strategies, but also with the thousands of people that he serves as well. So that was a great experience. And I've worked with lots of other people in the industry as well, just on the community strategy that leads to an increase in retention.
Yeah, and you have quite a bit. I mean, your client roster is deep. Really, really, I don't want to disclose anybody out of privacy, but really, really big names with very large communities and groups at some of the highest levels, at some of the most exposed brand levels, which can be terrifying at some points.
Yes, very much so. We've walked through a lot together in the last few years for sure on the community side of things. And yeah, all of my clients have, most of them have multiple 7 and even 8-figure memberships. So it's really fun to get to work with them, to get to build communities of thousands and even tens of thousands of people.
Okay. I have lots of questions for you, so I hope you don't mind because
No, I love it.
I feel like we spend a lot of time talking about marketing and talking about all things prospect centric, how to convert a lead, a prospect into the customer for the first time, marketing launches. Like that's my world and I love it. However, it pains me to see some really cool marketing strategies and techniques and effort being deployed on the front side of the business, but not in the same equality or focus on the back side of the business, which is where we care for our customers, because they are just as deserving, if not more, than all the energy that and direction that we give to our prospects. So why don't you do this? Why don't we start with this? Because a lot of people that are listening maybe have baby-sized communities, or like you said, they're 7-figure, 8-figures listeners who have big communities. Let's do almost like the evolution of community, because it's like the evolution of dance, like how you dance in the 80s and the 90s and the whatever, and the Jimmy Fallon skits and stuff like that. Like, how does a baby community grow? And at like what stages do we start to see that support is now required, additional support?
Yeah, this is a great question because it really comes down to the kind of community that you have and the level of customer experience that you want to create inside of your program. I mean, some people have lower dollar memberships where the content is really what is the most important aspect of that membership, and the community is supporting the content. And in communities like that, you can get away with being the business owner who's fulfilling the community manager role for a pretty long time. I mean, usually when you start to get into the like 300 to 500 member range, that's when most people are going, okay, I should probably hire somebody to help, probably part-time at that point in the business. But if you're starting out and you have a much higher ticket program where the promise really is around the support and the community and the coaching and whatever is happening is really more based around customer experience and guiding people to a result and not really as like deliverable heavy on a monthly basis, then you probably need to get a community manager in place right away, because that person is going to be providing the concierge level of support that somebody at that level of investment would probably expect. So you're going to get somebody on board a lot quicker. But then as you move past having a few hundred members and you get that first part-time person in place, a lot of people make the mistake, I will say, of just their most active community member becomes that part-time community manager. They're just like, this person comments a lot in the group, so I'm going to offer them a job. And sometimes that works out, but usually it doesn't work out. But that's usually what happens next is they get somebody part-time in that's probably been a part of their community that they're just like, I don't know, engage with people inside of my group, but they're not really thinking retention at that point. But as you start to get into 1,000 members and beyond, you really understand how important the community manager role is, because a community can make or break your membership no matter what your deliverables are. You can have the most amazing deliverables and something goes awry in your community or you're not paying attention to and protecting the culture, and people lose trust really quickly, or they no longer feel safe inside of your community. And it doesn't matter how great your content is. If they don't feel safe or if they no longer trust you or the people that work with you, then they're out. So that becomes really important as you head towards 1,000 members and, low 1,000 members. But when you get to, 2, 3, 5,000 members, 10,000 members where some of my clients are, community is everything, because retention is everything. There's nothing you can possibly do on the marketing side to make up for bad retention in a membership program. And so when you get to that place where you have multiple thousands of members, especially as you start to get to 10,000 members and beyond, you look at every single decimal point of that retention number on a regular basis, because you know that that's the difference between a positive growth rate and a negative growth rate inside of your program. And the community role really goes from this like community manager supporting and, a Facebook group or a circle community to somebody who's really a customer success manager, if you will, really making sure that they're guiding somebody to the results that they're looking for inside of the program while also protecting the culture. So that role really starts to shift. And from a team perspective, since I know you love talking about team, this is where I come in with a lot of my clients, and their community manager is just not performing how they want them to perform because they hired this person from their community because they were really good at engaging. But the requirements of this role have really shifted now to tracking and understanding retention and metrics that lead to retention, to really creating an experience that helps activate and reactivate members inside of a program. But you didn't hire somebody for that role. You hired for somebody to go and, comment and engage inside of a Facebook group. So as that role shifts, oftentimes you really have to challenge that community manager to step into a more advanced role, or sometimes, you end up having to move that person to a different part of the company or relieve them of their duties and put somebody in place that's ready for the next level of growth inside of the community.
I just wrote down 3 things on my notebook. I'm like, we're going to dive into this deeper. We're going to dive into, so buckle up, everybody.
So good.
What you just dropped was gold. I love the evolution of the community manager. I do. I'm obsessed with team development. And I just think sometimes we get on podcasts and we hear so-and-so has an integrator. So then everybody thinks they need an integrator, or they hear so-and-so has a chief of staff. So everybody wants a chief of staff. And I just, careful where you are in your business growth. I love what you said about even depending on the nature of the grouping, right? A membership is very different where that the focus is on the content as opposed to a group program like myself, right? Yeah, we have a curriculum inside the group program, but it is the care, the success, that word in particular, of the member that matters the most. Their success is my success, end of story, right? So I loved the distinguishing. I love how you distinguished the growth of the community manager, but also the differences between the types of groups, right?
Yeah.
So I have some questions because I want more people to have this, but I also understand because I'm in the CFO meetings, I'm in those conversations when we're allocating and looking at our profit and loss statement, and we're allocating budget, that one of the things that hold back entrepreneurs or CEOs from investing further in the management of their communities and their members in that customer centric role is because they feel like it's not a direct ROI. It's just like it just sucks out cash, right? When you look at rainmakers, sales reps, anybody in those kind of prospect centric roles, your PPC vendor, like they look at it like a slot machine. If I put 25 cents in and I get $1 out, like it's easier to justify.
Mm-hmm.
But then when they look at roles like community managers or client success coordinators or all the titles that are out there, they get kind of like, well, I don't. How do I justify this role? How do I justify it on a P&L? So I almost want you to like really make a like a lawyer, like argue that like you can't afford not to have this position because why would you even debate it in the first place? Get them, just get them.
Yeah, I will. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. And it's why whenever I start working with a client, we start with metrics and data. It's not the fun thing, it's not what they want to do, but getting that KPI dashboard in place is so important so that they can understand the value of the work that we're doing. And that's part of my community manager training program as well, because they need to understand how their role impacts these metrics. But before we even get to like the quantitative metrics, there are a couple other things that people don't think about. So I always like to explain it this way. There's three reasons that I think a community manager is a really important role in a business. And the first one is representation. The community manager represents you and your brand, and your customer experience is your brand. If you have an online program and you have a terrible customer experience and people don't get results, I don't care how beautiful your colors are. I don't care how great your copy is. At the end of the day, that will be your brand, is your ability to get people results or to not get people results. And so when you think about the first person that they will interact with other than you being the community manager, right? Once they get into the program, the community manager is there to onboard them and guide them in. It's really important that that person represents you well and creates an amazing experience that leads to a really solid brand reputation. The second thing is relationships. I like to think about it this way. If over your lifetime you built up this amazing black book of relationships, you know, and I know that it is one of the most valuable things in your business, the relationships that you have built. Well, that community manager becomes your relationship manager. They're handling those relationships and continuing those relationships for you. And so if you were to say there's somebody that's going to come alongside me and they're going to nurture those relationships within my community, what is the value of that to you? It's not a tangible value, but in so many ways, it's heavily important, and it's really risky if you put the wrong person in that role. But when we get to actual numbers, and there are actual quantitative numbers that are related to the community manager, a lot of people are tracking the wrong number. And I wouldn't say tracking the wrong number, but they're putting the outcome in the wrong place. So they think engagement is the outcome of a community manager. So often people say, like, how can I get more engagement in my community? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, do a political post in your community. That's a way to get more engagement in your community. But that's not what you want. Like at the end of the day, you don't want engagement. You want retention. So you really have to think about what are the leading metrics that lead to retention, which is a lagging indicator, right? So we look at member activation metrics. How many people are completing your orientation for your program? When is what percentage of your members have logged in within the last 45 days, right? What percentage of members are participating in your live calls every month? Those are all activation metrics that are directly associated with your community manager's ability to communicate what's going on and motivate people to show up and continue to nurture them through that member journey. And all of these impact retention, which retention is the one number that will determine the profitability of your membership over the long run. And even if you don't have a membership, we're talking about like refund rate, payment plan completions, all of that comes into play for courses as well. but it's directly associated with retention, which has everything to do with your profitability. And that's if we're just talking about one program. What if we start talking about programs that you have ascension models for? So let's say that you have a course and then you sell a membership on the back end, right?
Yeah.
The community manager is your salesperson. They are the person building the relationships. You can't have a course and then have somebody come in and be a salesperson at the end of that course and be like, hey, you should really buy this membership now. They haven't built the trust. They haven't invested in those relationships over that 10, 12-week period of that program. But if your community manager is doing that, and the community manager comes and says, I can't wait to see you inside of this membership. I can see you've already made XYZ progress. You're going to make ABC progress when you join the membership. Hello, they become one of your best salespeople. So especially if you have an ascension model and you have programs on the back end of your course, then a community manager has a direct ROI.
You just slayed that. I feel like I just gave you a softball. I thought it was a curveball. No, it's a softball. You just nailed it. Yeah, it's can we go back to the money thing? Because I teach this in my Fortune 1 inside of my program, right? The Fortune 5 framework. In Fortune 1, we talk about different positions and everybody staying in their lane and somebody caring for the prospect and somebody caring for the customer and somebody caring for the company. But I also make the persuasive argument like what you just did, which is like everybody should be contributing to money. Everyone. So if the rainmaker's job is to convert $0 to $1 and like all that activity that just in that simplicity goes and affects that, then your community managers or at least that customer centric lane, anybody who supports that lane of the business should also be stretching that dollar from 1 to 2, right? Because you're right. They're the ones that are closest to the action. They're the ones that can upsell, cross sell, ascend, like all of that language, right? And if they are personally responsible for a customer or a member's success, that can also lead to sales or the increase in customer lifetime value. But to your point in the relationships, one person having a phenomenal experience is going to tell all their freaking friends. I tell people all the time when I find a new restaurant that I'm obsessed with, like, you have to go, or you have to get these pants, or you have like, by the nature of humanity, we want to impart on others things that have benefited us with those that we love and care for. So like, there's so many ways that just say, I guess, externally processing what you just shared out loud. Like there's so many ways to justify the revenue. It's not hard.
Yeah, if you have the role shaped correctly, right? I think a
Right.
lot of people shape the community manager role as a Facebook group babysitter. And if that is how you empower that individual or really disempower that individual, then that's the result that you're going to get. But if you help a community manager see that their job is to really cultivate the community and that their primary focus should be on the members' progress, then that shifts everything for them. And you mentioned lifetime customer value, but that comes from retention, right? 100% is directly associated with retention. And so when a community manager understands how to get somebody activated in your program to help them get results, yes, they probably are going to become a great referral partner, maybe even a great affiliate partner down the line. But the lifetime value of your customer goes up significantly with every increase in percentage point for retention.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm so passionate about it because I believe that people have been burned by the community manager role because they didn't really fully understand the role and what they should be asking of somebody in that role.
I couldn't agree more. I'm like you. I mean, this is what we have in common. Maybe because we're Enneagram 8s, but like both of us. But we're going to, don't come for my people, or I will come for you.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't you dare. I felt that, and right when he said it, I'm like, yep, I know what you're talking about. We'll be back with this interview right after the commercial break. Did you know that I have a free Rainmaker hiring kit? Skip the formal recruiting process and learn how to source Rainmaker applicants that are already connected to you. I'll show you how to turn a walking testimonial into a rockstar team member for free. Head to veronicarami.com or click the link in my show notes to get your hands on the free Rainmaker hiring kit. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, I have a question for you because you said this. It's one of the things that you said, and even in the evolution of dance part, was the mistake when people are going out and finding a prospective community manager, and you went right for the jugular. Like, you think it's the most engaged person in your group, which is really interesting. I'm just going to say it out loud because I was just at Funnel Hacking Live last week, I don't know when this podcast will come out, but I attended Funnel Hacking Live in 2022, and they awarded the most engaged inner circle member, and now they promoted her to be the official facilitator for the next year. But she did it because there was the absence of, like, there was
Mm-hmm.
complete absence of that care for a $50,000 mastermind member. So she just took it upon herself as a member because she wanted to get the most out of her own
Yeah.
investment, and she's just a really good person if you know her. But I just witnessed that, and I've seen it done in Tony and Dean's programs and a number of other programs. So one, I want to revisit, why do you feel like that's not necessarily the number one place to look for a prospective community manager? And then number two, how do you feel about like OBMs or DOOs or some of the other more commonly certified or trained individuals in our industry maybe being that, like, I want you to speak to that, like where not to look and where would you recommend looking?
Yeah, this is an interesting
Mm-hmm.
topic because every now and then somebody finds a unicorn and they pick somebody from their community
Sure.
that has been really great at engaging in the community, and they get them in and they become a rock star community manager. And I have seen that happen before. But what usually happens is you find somebody who's great at engaging in your community, which oftentimes means that they fulfill one of the 7 roles of a community manager. And that one role, we won't go into what all those 7 roles, but that one role is the cheerleader role. And that's an important part of being a community manager, but it's just one of 7 aspects of being a community manager. And so you may get them in, and oftentimes one of 2 things happens. One, they get in and they have been your best customer. They have built amazing relationships inside of your community, and they get into the back of house and they realize that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and you don't really show up with a smile on your face every day, and you maybe don't practice everything that you preach, and your values maybe don't show through all the time, and they are blindsided. And it's not what they thought. They wanted to be close to the influencer. They wanted to be in that culture and environment all the time. And when they get in and they realize, like, oh, actually this is still just a job, it's still a job. There ends up being tension that's built, and oftentimes you have a severing of relationship that doesn't just impact your team, but it impacts the community, because now you took this person with all of this influence in your community and all of these relationships, and they're no longer your biggest fan. So that's definitely a risk, and it's something that I have seen happen a lot. The other thing that happens is you look at what they've been doing inside of your community and you're like, they're already doing this role. Now I'm just going to pay them to do it. But going back again to what the purpose of a community manager is, that's not the purpose of a community manager. Or why would you even have paid them? You would have just allowed them to continue to be an amazing member of the community and support the engagement and be a cheerleader to everybody there. We don't need to pay people to do that. If you're running a strong community, you will naturally have leaders rise up that cultivate the culture in your community, that help drive forward the cause in your community, that make sure that, if a link isn't working, your team knows, everybody in the community knows, those people. They're already doing it without being paid. So why do we feel like we just need to now start paying them to fulfill the same role? So when you bring them in, you actually need to be asking more of them, and you need to be leveraging different skills, which oftentimes you're not even interviewing them to see if they have those skills, because you just feel like they are the person. So my recommendation is, if you ever want to hire somebody from within your community, which some people do because they feel like the most important thing a community manager needs to know is the program, the culture, the values. They need to speak from experience. And I agree, for some of my clients, what they teach is so nuanced. And for example, one of my clients teaches weight loss. Her community manager needs to have
Mm-hmm.
lost weight using her method, or it doesn't make sense. So for her, picking people from her program makes sense. However, you still have to put them through the same gauntlet of hiring that you would anybody else, right? You have to put them through that same gauntlet. You can't just cherry pick somebody because of how they engage in your community. And then on the other side, I will say that I was just talking to one of my clients about this, and not for the community manager role, but for an operations and coaching role. And she really was like, this person knows like how to coach, and she'd be really great at this role, but she's not in our community. She doesn't understand our philosophy and what we teach. And my response was, but isn't that what you do day in and day out? You teach your philosophy. You have a program that teaches people your philosophy. You literally wouldn't have to do anything else to train them on your philosophy except for put them in the program that you put 3,000 people through this year. So I think we forget that the easiest thing oftentimes for us to teach people is the way we do things, is our methodology, because that's what you teach. So you can put them through your membership training, you can put them through your course training, you can get them acclimated to what you teach, but it's much harder to get them the experience and to develop the skills that they need to actually fulfill the role. So that's really the balance that I think we run into with any role, but definitely with the community manager role, is that balance between, is it more important that they're part of the community, they understand my methodology, inside and out, or is it more important that they have these skills that are required of a community manager? And I think both of them are important, but how you go about getting them just depends. Hire for skill, train them through the programs that you already have existing, or you hire somebody who's already in your program, but you validate the fact that they have the skills that you need.
It's a really interesting, what I would say, paradigm shift that you just did, because I think it's extremely attractive for CEOs to hire members, basically take a walking testimonial and convert them into a team member, right? Like they partook of your products, your services, they believe in your mission, your vision, your brand. All of that is there. So like it's so attractive. It's like so sexy, because in some ways you're like, I've just hacked my onboarding in half, if not all. At least some CEOs like, I don't have to do any onboarding.
Yeah, it feels easy.
But to what you're saying is, just because they're a walking testimonial of the product, the service, or the brand, it doesn't disqualify the necessary skill that is still a requirement of the role to be successful. Because to your point, I have also seen that, where I've seen people that got close to the person that they admired and they wanted to emulate, realized like, Veronica, the person I follow on Instagram, isn't Veronica the boss. I'm using myself because I don't want to call anyone out. But then they get disenfranchised or disillusioned, and then it's like even more heartbreaking. It's like that quote that they say, "Don't ever meet your heroes."
Yeah.
Because what happens if Tom Hanks is rude to you at Starbucks? You're like, "No, not Tom Hanks, America's treasure." So I have seen that, especially in my experience working at some big names and some big brands and big personalities. When we take somebody from the community and they get too close to the visionary, they get sad because it's not as shiny as what they had originally thought. Yeah. So that really resonates with me, and I've seen it firsthand now that you've articulated it in that way, right?
And it's kind of interesting because I'm speaking to this as somebody who was hired from somebody's community. So yeah, I was in Stu's community, and he plucked me out and said, we want you to be our director of community.
Yeah.
But that being said, I still went through a gauntlet of being hired, and I came with the expertise. So I had, since 2012, been running my own consulting company, working in the community space. And so he knew I had that expertise, but even so, it was my activity in the community that got his attention, but I still had to go through the same gauntlet of being hired, and there was like, for me, I think because I have worked with so many large companies before, and I knew that there was no way possible that I wasn't going to experience some bumpiness in working for this person that I'd been a part of their community for a couple of years, that when I got in and I started building relationships with Stu and the team, and I realized like it's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time, I just knew that was the human experience. I wasn't shocked by it. And I think that's really important for us to realize, that when that happens, it's not the business owner's fault. It's not because the business owner isn't authentic, or they're not like living, they're being fake out in the real world. 99% of the time, it's just because they're human, and they do what everybody does, is you put on a show to show up the best you can for your audience and your community. And you're on fire when you're with your audience and your community, and you're delivering at your best, but you can't be at that energy, and you can't be at your best 24/7. And so when you're working with somebody 48 hours a week or more, you're going to experience times when they're not at their best. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them or wrong with the company.
Sure.
It's just humans. That's what's going to happen.
No, I totally agree. I don't know if I would say that my personal experience has been 99%.
Yeah, you're like, I'm the 1%. Yeah.
No. I'm just saying, like, I in just all of my human experiences, sometimes those that espouse to certain brands don't live their brands, which is always disheartening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's outside of just being a human and having a cranky day or having an off day, or like,
Yeah.
for sure, I understand that. Okay, so here's a question I have for you, because okay, I'll just reveal some of my own vulnerability. I love the idea of a really intimate group program where like only 30 people can come in. And then there's the part of me, the Robin Hood inside of me, that's like, I gotta help all the people. Like, I have to help all of them, at least all that I feel called or that are put in my way, to serve. So I feel like that mantle, that calling, that's pushing me from behind as well and guiding me. And so there's that part of me that's like, okay, I want to help as many people as I can, but then no, I only want 30 people in my program because it'll be really intimate. But if I'm being really honest with myself, it's because I'm scared. I'm scared of like, I'm hiding in plain sight. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm scared of a community or a group that gets too big for me to handle, because I've seen, if you've been in the online industry as long as you and I have, we've seen communities turn on the founder, the leader, the host, the moderator, I mean, that person. And it is brutal to watch. And I think maybe that's what scares me, not so much I can tell myself the story like, oh, I'm just trying to keep it intimate. But the truth is, maybe I'm scared of it getting too big. And what happens if more voices, don't have nice things to say? That's crazy, right? Like, that's the imposter syndrome, or those limiting beliefs that I even wrestle with. But you've seen communities turn on their people.
Yes, I have. Communities of thousands have turned on their people,
Yes.
and they got through it. And they
Okay, can we
made it
talk
out.
about
They
this?
made it out on the other side and they recovered.
Okay, let's talk about it. Is it one of those things? 'Cause I don't know where you stand on this. Is it one of those things where you're like, it's gonna happen, eventually it will, or you're saying it's not necessarily going to be guaranteed to happen, but if it does, you'll be okay. Like, where do you stand?
I don't think it's guaranteed to happen. In fact, that's one of the things I work on with my clients is developing such a
Mm-hmm.
strong culture and really strong boundaries that anything like that is nipped in the bud early on. I have a
Okay.
few clients that have rules inside of their community. You don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about hot topics of the day. Like, we are here to do this one thing, like improve our self-image, lose weight. And it's our job to protect your headspace around that particular topic. There are lots of communities where you can go and have those conversations, but this isn't one of them, right?
Mm.
So that's a big part of it. And even then, some of them have experienced conflict inside of the community. I do teach that inevitably the life cycle of a community involves storming. So it's forming, norming, storming, performing. Like, there's four aspects to a life cycle of a community, but one of them is storming. And this happens naturally in relationships that are going to be strong. I mean, you know this. Everybody knows this when I say this, but everybody fears conflict in a relationship. But if you think
Mm-hmm.
about your closest friends, the strongest relationships you've ever had, they probably came on the other side of some type of conflict, some type of
Mm.
disagreement that you worked through together. And so when you have an issue like that in your community, if you see it as a realignment moment, you don't hide from it, you address it. You see it as a moment to realign the community around the culture and the values that can actually strengthen the community. But it definitely doesn't. I mean, it's not an inevitable to have your community turn on you. Now, having little tiffs and stuff like that among community members, I mean, we're human. It's going to happen. But having like a big issue inside of your community, I I would say for some people it's probably more likely to happen because of their level of influence, because depending on the season that we're at in the world. We just walked through a big season with the pandemic and with the BLM movement and all sorts of things that there was so much pressure to take a stand that a lot of people
Yeah.
were caught off guard and were caught in some challenging situations, right? But those businesses are still thriving today. They made it through. Some of them hid for a while. Some of them came out strong, standing up for themselves and their beliefs and their culture. And either way, like, they've made it through today, because the world that we live in, we think we are so important, and we think our communities are so important. But the reality is, it's like, you may be the hot topic for a moment, but you're not going to be the hot topic for a year, probably not even for a month. So your community will recover. And more than anything, the best way to be prepared for anything like that is by establishing a strong culture from the beginning. And so that is really identifying the beliefs, the behaviors, and the boundaries. What do we believe to be true about ourselves, our industry, like helping people develop an identity? What are the behaviors that we expect of ourselves and of each other because of those beliefs? And then what are the boundaries we have in place, because these are the behaviors that we allow and don't allow. And if you can continually set that up, not just in your onboarding, but you're always speaking to that and helping develop that identity, then when there is an issue inside of the community, chances are your community is going to be on it before it ever gets to you.
Yeah, because you've empowered them, and you've said, like you said, that you clearly articulated the walls of the playground. This is
Yeah.
where the walls of the play. And I think even for my own children, it's like, if my child can't see me in a mall, they instantly feel unsafe, right?
Yeah.
And so when you provide walls to those that you care for, that actually makes them feel psychologically safe, right? And like you said, the boundary and the standard has been set. There shouldn't be a surprise when your kid has a tantrum at the table what you're going to do, because it's already predetermined. So
Yep.
same thing, right? If the group goes in that, I love that life cycle, by the way. If it goes through just a natural life cycle, it is what it is, right? But you're not caught off guard because you've already established what you'll do when your kid throws his food on the ground. Like, right when, and I'm not comparing children to your members. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it has parallels for me as a mother who feels a responsibility to have my children be self-reliant and to grow up and be the best that they can be and have success. But me too, like, I have a responsibility for those that I care for and that have entrusted in me, their team members, and entrusted in me their future and their growth of their company. But it doesn't mean that I have to forfeit my own standards as well, right?
Exactly. And that's where that leadership and structure are so important. I talk about this in the
Yeah.
context of creating safety in a community, which you can't
Yeah.
have connection without safety. So a lot of people will come to me and they're like, I have a connection problem. I'm like, no, you don't. You have a safety problem. You aren't being a leader in your community. You are selling and ghosting. And if you're showing up as a leader and you're setting these boundaries to begin with, and you're upholding them, and you're creating the structure, and you're leading people through times of conflict, connection will happen. But more often than not, it's like, if we build it, they will come. And then you just let them like have their own way, and then you're shocked when the culture has gone sideways. Like, are you being a leader in there, or did you just like create this community and hope that they would figure it out on their own?
Well, and that's that same mentality that gets you in trouble with your communities gets you in trouble with your own teams on the inside. Like, team culture is intentional. Team
Yeah.
culture is not passive. It is active participation and leadership and modeling and exemplifying and holding boundaries. I mean, like, that is literally the same idea when you're talking about your own company team culture. And what's interesting to me about communities is they're the first ones to sniff out when your team culture is off,
Yeah.
because they have exposure to different members of your team. So if you're not leading strongly within the walls of your team, that's going to permeate, I believe, into your groups, into your communities as well. So,
Yeah.
like,
100%.
just keep in check all areas that you are responsible for.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you have had so many mic drops. And I know that you've thrown out very casually, by the way, some just like killer frameworks. Oh, and then there's this, and there's the 3 R's and this. I'm like, and I know that people can work with you one on one, but I also believe that you have, not a group program, but you have a course and things like that. So can you tell the Rainmaker listeners, especially, listen up, guys, if you have a community, a group, a membership, and you want your community to be your walking sales force where they're telling the world about how awesome you are, then, like, can you tell the people where they can learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, of course. Well, I have a podcast. So that is like one place to go to get more free goodness like this, Community Creators Podcast. But I do have a community training program. So it's a course. You can find that at communitycultivated.com. That's really great if you have a community manager already that you want to really challenge them to up-level how they're showing up inside of your community and give them proven frameworks and structures to do so. Put them through that. Or if you, the business owner, you don't have a community manager yet, but you're thinking about hiring one, you need to get your framework. You need to get your culture. You need to get all of those things established before you bring this person on board, because you're not going to have anything to onboard them to if you haven't already established those core elements of your community. So I recommend that you go through it before you bring somebody else in to fulfill that role. And then, of course, I'm on Instagram. You can connect with me, Shana Speaks, Shana Speaks on Instagram. And if you DM me, I do have a community manager job description template. So if you're thinking about hiring one, or if you have one and you're like, what am I missing here? Like, my person just comments in a Facebook group, just send me a DM on Instagram and I will send you over access to that community manager job description.
Amazing. You are amazing. I totally and completely believe in what you do, because rainmakers need to have someone to trust to take care of the people they just converted. So
it's a beautiful
literally
symbiotic relationship
Yes.
between the rainmaker and the community
Yes.
manager or cultivator,
Yeah.
as I call them, because if the rainmaker isn't helping pre-onboard people effectively, then that makes the community manager's job harder. And the community manager isn't helping people get results, then the rainmaker has no stories to tell. So they are like best buds in the business.
Yep.
They should be talking on a weekly basis,
Yep.
sharing information, keeping in
Yep.
touch. And yeah, that's like, those two roles are so symbiotic that if people don't see that, if they don't see how community and marketing, oh my gosh, when you can align those two things, that's when the magic really happens.
I couldn't disagree more. I really couldn't disagree with more. Like, it's abso-freaking-lutely. Like, the worst thing that can happen to a rainmaker is where you lose trust in the thing that you are selling. So, for example, if I knew that the community wasn't like delivering on the best freaking lemonade that my job was to sell in the first place, of course that's going to impact me if I have any shred of integrity.
Yeah.
So like, it's just so critical that those that are helping you sell and convert prospects for the first time, aka your rainmakers and the rainmakers team, that marketing team, have the confidence to know that that community manager, that community lane and support is like delivering exactly what you sold. So critical for you as a business owner to have and live and breathe the integrity throughout all sides of the business. Boom. Now I just got fired up.
I love it. I love it. There's your mic drop for the day.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Rainmaker Podcast. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Rainmaker Podcast. We believe you can't get real results or have real relationships that last without being real first. If you resonated with today's episode, leave us a review so we can keep serving up the truth and tips that help you become the empowered leader that I know that you are. And always head over to veronicarami.com to check out all the free resources I have for you and the show notes from this episode. Until next time, my friends.